Millionaire's shocking 7-day marriage proposal to a virgin. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Alcott's Stories, where love isn't just told, it's felt. Today's story is something you've never seen before. What if a millionaire had just 7 days to find real love and ended up proposing to a virgin stranger under a sky full of tears? Trust me, this one will melt your heart, stir your soul, and keep you hooked until the very last moment. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? I love knowing how far our story family reaches. Now grab your snacks, get cozy, because this story is about to take you on an emotional roller coaster. You'll never forget Damian Cole, 30, a handsome white millionaire with piercing blue eyes and medium-long stylish black hair, had everything money could buy, except genuine love. Bored with meaningless flings, his friends challenged him. Propose to a complete stranger within 7 days, if you're brave enough to believe in real love. On the same night, he noticed her, a beautiful, brown-skinned young woman with long braided hair and deep brown eyes, waiting alone at a quiet art cafe. Something about her innocence pulled him in. He didn't know her name, but he felt a strange connection. That was the beginning. Damian woke up with her name unspoken, but etched in every beat of his heart. He didn't even know it yet, Amira, but the memory of her lingered, like the last line of a beautiful poem. The next morning, unable to resist the pull, he returned to the cafe, this time earlier, hoping she'd return. And she did, wearing a denim jacket over a faded floral dress, her braided hair tied back loosely, a book in one hand, a tired yawn on her lips. She sat at the same corner, and Damian, dressed down in jeans and a hoodie to blend in, took the table beside hers. Their eyes met again, this time longer, fuller. She gave a small, polite smile before returning to her reading. It was the first thread of connection. Days passed, and Damian carefully inserted himself into her routine. He learned she ordered mint tea, read poetry when stressed, and sketched old people's faces with remarkable tenderness. He overheard her talking to the cafe owner about her brother, sick, struggling to get treatment too expensive. That night, Damian called his personal assistant and paid the hospital anonymously. The next day, Amira received the news that her brother's next treatment cycle was covered. She cried quietly in the cafe's restroom. Not knowing who the guardian angel was, Damian watched from afar, moved by her strength, tempted to take credit, but afraid it would seem manipulative. Instead, he bumped into her by accident as she left the cafe one rainy afternoon. He offered to share his umbrella. She hesitated. He was a stranger, polite but still unfamiliar. Yet something in his gaze made her say yes. As they walked, he learned her name, Amira. It suited her, gentle, graceful. She asked his name in return. Damian, he said, leaving out the surname and fortune. They walked silently for a while, her steps careful, his pulse unsteady. She mentioned her studies, social work at a local college, and her dream of opening a youth shelter. He told her he admired people who gave more than they took. She glanced at him, a soft look of curiosity behind her lashes. The following days unfolded like scenes from a quiet film. They began meeting coincidentally more often. He helped carry her books. She offered to buy him coffee once. They talked about movies, life, fears, dreams. Still, she remained guarded. There was a wall, tall and made of experience, or perhaps the lack of it. She'd never dated, never kissed, never let anyone that close. She didn't judge Damian, but she sensed something hidden behind his kindness. She once told him, "I don't trust easily. Not because I've been hurt, but because I've seen others get broken by false promises." He respected that. He didn't rush. He slowed down for her, even when his own heart was racing. Sometimes she'd smile a little longer. Sometimes she'd let her eyes linger. But she never asked for his number, never asked where he lived, what he did. That mystery made it purer. She wasn't after anything. She simply enjoyed his presence, and he felt honored by that. One evening, they watched a street musician together. She hummed along, swaying slightly, forgetting her walls for a moment. Damian stared at her like a man seeing sunlight after a decade underground. He wanted to tell her everything, that he was rich, powerful, living a life she couldn't imagine. But that would shatter what they had. And worse, he feared losing her completely. If she discovered the truth, that this connection had started because of a dare, a stupid, arrogant dare, and now he was falling hard. Amira told him she believed in energies, in gut feelings. "You can't lie to the soul," she once said, sipping tea. Damien smiled, but inside he panicked. What if her soul already sensed the truth? What if every gesture he made was being measured by a heart that had never been fooled? He became more thoughtful, listened more, spoke less. The more he knew her, the more he hated the countdown in his head. Day 3, day 4, each moment felt too short, too sacred. He watched her laugh with a child at the orphanage she volunteered at and wondered how someone so unseen by the world could shine this brightly. She wasn't untouched because she was waiting for a fairy tale. She was untouched because she valued her heart too much to let just anyone hold it. Damien had held diamonds, gold, contracts worth millions, but now he longed to hold her trust. And he knew he hadn't earned it yet. As they sat on a park bench one evening, she told him about her mother, gone too soon, and how she'd raised her siblings like a second parent. He listened, wordless, aching for her. She wasn't fragile, she was forged in fire, in responsibility, in dignity. She turned to him and said, "Sometimes I wonder if people like me are meant to be loved in fairy tales, or just forgotten in real life." His chest tightened. He wanted to scream that she was unforgettable, that she was changing him with every breath. But instead he whispered, "I don't think anyone who meets you could ever forget you." She smiled softly but didn't reply. As she stood to leave, he wanted to stop her, tell her everything, fall to his knees. But he didn't. He watched her walk away, each step echoing in his soul. He had 3 days left. 3 days to turn an accidental connection into something real. But how do you earn the heart of a girl who deserves nothing less than forever? When you only gave, Damien sat alone on the edge of his penthouse balcony, staring at the skyline, but all he could see was Amira's smile. The curve of it etched deeper into his mind than any deal he'd ever closed. The world beneath him pulsed with power and noise, but inside he was quiet, too quiet. Falling for her hadn't been part of the dare. He was supposed to charm, impress, propose, and walk away with a story to tell. But every time she laughed at his awkward jokes or touched her chin when thinking, she stole another piece of him. It wasn't just her beauty. It was how she made broken things feel fixable. He remembered her voice, soft, genuine, never trying to impress, and it haunted him. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, reminding him the clock was ticking. Day 5, 2 left. But how do you confess to someone that you love them, when the way you entered their life was born of a lie? Amira, meanwhile, found herself lingering longer after their conversations, catching herself smiling at random, her heart skipping in ways it never had. She didn't believe in fairy tales, but Damien made silence feel safe, and vulnerability feel strong. Yet the questions in her head grew louder. Who exactly was he? Why was a man who clearly came from money walking her home every night, showing up wherever she was, asking questions that hinted at something deeper? She tried Googling his first name and guessed spellings of his last, but nothing specific came up. Part of her didn't want to know, scared the truth would ruin the purity of what they shared. But part of her feared he was too good to be real. Damien, on the other hand, became a storm of conflict. He started writing a letter, one that explained everything, the dare, the guilt, the unexpected love. He folded it twice, sealed it in an envelope and carried it in his coat pocket. Every time he saw her, his hand brushed against it, but he couldn't bring himself to hand it over. One wrong move and she'd vanish. He watched her help a blind man cross the street and knew she was the kind of person who gave without cameras, without credit. She was rare, untouched by ego, unaware of her own radiance. Amira, though drawn to him, started to notice things: his watch, too expensive for a student or regular worker, the way he dodged personal questions, or how sometimes his gaze lingered like he was memorizing her before disappearing. She began sketching him, subconsciously at first, a faint outline of his jaw in the corner of a page, then his eyes sharp but uncertain. She realized her heart was no longer hers. It beat for someone whose truth she didn't fully know. Damien tried to act normal, laughed naturally, but inside, fear clung to him like a second skin. He took her to an open-air library event, hoping to distract her with poetry, but even then, her head tilted at him with questions unspoken. She mentioned once, "You seem like someone who's lived two lives, one that everyone sees, and one that you hide." He froze. She didn't press further. That night he returned home and tore up the letter, then rewrote it, then tore it again. He wasn't ready to lose her, but hiding was starting to feel like a slow betrayal. Meanwhile, Amira found herself confiding in her best friend. "He's kind but mysterious. My heart trusts him, but my mind is warning me." Her friend urged caution, reminding her of heartbreak stories that began with charm and ended in scars. But Amira defended him, even without knowing why. That's how deeply he had already embedded himself into her life. Damien started having nightmares of losing her, of her eyes filled with betrayal instead of light. The dare had turned into a curse. The very thing that brought them together now threatened to tear them apart. Still, he kept showing up, bringing her favorite pastries, sitting quietly beside her as she studied, offering nothing but presents. Amira started writing about him in her journal, calling him the quiet chaos. She didn't know if he was her beginning or her heartbreak. One evening, while watching a street performer, she asked him directly, "Why do you spend so much time with me?" He paused, his mouth opened, then closed. He wanted to say, "Because you're the first person who's ever made me feel human." Instead, he said, "Because I want to." She nodded, not satisfied, but unwilling to push. That night, she watched him walk away and whispered to the sky, "Please don't let this be pretend." And he, miles away, whispered to the stars, "Please give me the courage to tell her it's real." The fourth night arrived like a breath held too long, full of tension, anticipation, and unspoken truths hovering just beneath the surface. Damien texted Amira with a simple message, "Wear something warm. I want to show you my favorite secret." She agreed, unaware that the place he chose wasn't just beautiful. It was a sacred space he had never shared with anyone, a hidden garden tucked behind ivy-covered gates on the edge of the city, lit only by the soft glow of fairy lights tangled in tree branches, and the gentle shimmer of moonlight on dew-kissed leaves. As they stepped into the garden, the air felt enchanted, like time had folded in on itself, making space for only them. Amira gasped, the stars above mirrored in her wide brown eyes, and Damien felt breathless just watching her take it all in. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You're the first person I've brought here," he confessed. And she turned to him with a softness that said she believed him. They walked slowly, side by side, between rose bushes and old benches, until they reached a stone fountain that whispered quietly in the silence. There, he laid out a picnic he had prepared. Candles flickered between them, and a small speaker played the sound of violins in the distance. Over sandwiches and strawberries, they shared pieces of themselves they had never given to anyone else. Amira spoke of her dreams, not of riches or luxury, but of building something that mattered, of creating a shelter for children like her siblings, of writing a book one day about silent warriors like her mother. Damien, in return, opened up about his father's absence, how money had raised him but never loved him. He told her he often felt like a ghost in his own life, seen everywhere, but truly known by no one. Her fingers touched his hand gently, and it sent a tremor through his soul. Laughter followed, when she joked about her terrible cooking and how she once tried to make cookies that turned into rocks. Damien couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, he felt young, not the billionaire, not the polished public figure, but just a man who desperately wanted to be enough for the woman beside him. As the night deepened, the stars above them seemed to lean closer, as if listening. Damien watched her closely. The way she tucked her braid behind her ear, the way she bit her lip when she was nervous, and how her eyes always darted away when emotions became too loud. He wanted to tell her everything, that this started as a dare. But now she was the only truth that mattered. He opened his mouth a dozen times, but swallowed the confession each time, the fear of losing her heavier than the guilt of silence. Instead, he said, "I feel something I've never felt before, and I want to know if you feel it too." Amira's face flushed, a shy smile blooming across her lips before she looked away. Her silence was not rejection. It was careful consideration, the kind that comes from a heart untrained in love. Finally, she met his eyes, her voice soft and uncertain. "I don't know what it is, but when I'm with you the world feels quieter, safer." That answer was everything. They didn't kiss. Damien wanted to, but he didn't move. Amira's hand found his, their fingers intertwining like roots growing in rich soil, slow and sure. They sat in silence, hearts thundering like war drums, afraid of ruining the fragile magic with anything louder than a heartbeat. He watched her breathe, steady but deep, like she was anchoring herself to this moment. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he leaned into her, afraid even to exhale. The garden held its breath too. He thought about the deadline, just a few days left, but right now, all he wanted was to freeze this night, live in it forever. He didn't want it to end with a ring or a confession. He wanted it to linger, to grow, to be real. And in that stillness, under a velvet sky stitched with stars, a new kind of love took root, quiet, cautious, unspoken, but stronger than either of them could yet understand. The morning after the garden, something inside Amira shifted, a quiet courage, blooming where hesitation had lived. She met Damien in the same cafe where their story began, her eyes steady but uncertain, like a woman holding a fragile truth between her lips. He noticed the slight tremble in her hands as she wrapped them around her teacup, her braided hair pinned back with more care than usual. "I want to tell you something," she said, her voice low, almost shaking. Damien leaned in, bracing for anything, but nothing could have prepared him for the quiet storm she released. "I've never been with anyone, not physically, not emotionally. I've never even had a first kiss," she admitted, her gaze falling to the table. Her words hung in the air like delicate glass, honest, raw, vulnerable. She wasn't confessing shame, but fear. Fear of being seen as naive, of being unwanted because of what she'd preserved, of being judged in a world that treated innocence like weakness. Damien's heart stuttered. He wanted to say it made her sacred, that her depth and strength made her the rarest thing he'd ever encountered. But instead, panic clawed at him. He felt unworthy, like a thief who had snuck into a church, uninvited with dirty hands. His silence lasted too long. Amira gave a small, sad smile, mistaking it for discomfort. "I don't need promises," she whispered. "I just need honesty." But honesty was a loaded gun in Damien's pocket. He forced a soft reply, something safe and vague, afraid the truth would break everything. Later that afternoon, the truth found its way to her anyway, mercilessly, and from the one person who cared enough to investigate. Amira's best friend had always been skeptical, had always sensed something off. She dug deeper. And it didn't take long to uncover Damien's real identity, a powerful millionaire, heir to a vast fortune with a well-polished reputation in the media, and worse, the viral whispers of a reckless challenge he had allegedly accepted. 7 days, proposed to a stranger. The friend showed Amira an online gossip post, and though it didn't name her, the details lined up too closely to be coincidence. Her heart dropped. Her breath caught. The garden, the late-night walks, the softness in his voice. Was it all a performance, a dare? She felt her stomach twist in betrayal. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply left, disappeared, blocked his number, deleted the messages, vanished without goodbye. Damien came to the cafe the next day, and the next, but she was gone. Like smoke after a fire he never meant to light. His calls went unanswered, texts unread. He drove past her school, her volunteering center, even the hospital where her brother had been treated. But she was nowhere. The ache in his chest was unbearable, different from business losses or public scandals. This wasn't reputation, it was regret, real searing, soul-deep regret. He walked into the garden alone, the place where her laughter once echoed, and sat by the fountain with a letter in his hand, the one he had rewritten too many times to count. He read it aloud to the wind, hoping the stars would carry his words to wherever she had gone. "I never meant to lie," he whispered. "What began as a foolish dare became the most real thing I've ever known. You showed me how to feel, And now, I don't know how to breathe without you. He stayed until the sky turned navy and the garden lights flickered on like tiny apologies. He replayed every moment, wondering if he could have stopped her pain if he'd only spoken sooner. But the damage was done. Somewhere Amira sat alone in her tiny bedroom, staring at the same stars, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, and asking the same question over and over. Was I just a lesson in someone else's game? Neither of them knew how to undo the silence now stretched between them. Neither knew if the love that had bloomed so quietly could survive the noise of truth. Damien couldn't breathe the same after she vanished. The world felt hollow, like it had lost color, weight, and meaning. His penthouse, once a symbol of prestige, now echoed with silence too loud to bear. The luxury around him felt insulting. None of it could bring her back. He had tasted something pure, something unbought, and now it was gone. Every second that passed tightened the guilt around his chest. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, unable to recognize the man who had once laughed at the idea of love, who had accepted a foolish dare without knowing it would change him forever. With only one day left, he ditched his car, his phone, and everything that made him Damien Cole the millionaire, choosing instead to walk the streets like an ordinary man in search of the only woman who'd ever made him feel extraordinary. He retraced every memory, every bench they'd sat on, every bookstore she lingered in, every mural wall she smiled at. He returned to the cafe where her chair now sat empty, bought her favorite tea just to feel close to her, and left a handwritten note tucked in the pages of the poetry book she always read. He went to her college and stood by the courtyard, eyes scanning faces, heart racing with every brown-skinned girl with braids that passed by. But she wasn't there. The city felt larger than ever, like it was conspiring to hide her. Drenched in exhaustion, he ended up at the garden, their garden, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. Then, as the sky began to weep, a soft drizzle soaking the world in silver tears, something pulled him toward the edge of town. He remembered the orphanage. She once spoke of the place that held her, dreams and pieces of her past. He ran through the rain, his tailored shirt clinging to his skin, his shoes ruined by puddles, but he didn't care. Every raindrop felt like penance. When he finally reached the gates, breathless and soaked, he saw her, standing alone beneath the dim yellow light outside the orphanage door, arms folded tightly across her chest, braid wet, eyes distant. She didn't move when she saw him. She didn't run. She just stood still, like she had expected him, feared him, and wanted to disappear all at once. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice breaking like glass. Damien stepped forward. No umbrella, no defense, no excuses. "Because I can't lose you," he said, water dripping from his lashes. Her jaw tightened. "You made me feel safe," she whispered, pain rising with each word. "But it was all built on a dare. You were a game to them." Her voice cracked, but her eyes were fire. He swallowed hard, the truth aching in his throat. "You were never a game to me," he said, voice hoarse, trembling. "Not for a second." The silence between them throbbed, rain dancing around them like a storm composed just for this moment. She turned her face away, biting her lip to keep the tears from spilling. "You should have told me," she said. "I would have rather heard the truth than been written into a lie." Damien nodded, shame pulsing in his veins. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared you'd walk away before I could show you that I wasn't pretending anymore. That I was falling. No, that I fell completely." She looked at him then, really looked. Saw the anguish, the sincerity, the desperate regret. He stepped closer but didn't touch her. "I'm not here to win anything. I'm here because you're the only real thing I've ever known. And even if you never forgive me, even if I never hold your hand again, I will keep loving you, quietly, endlessly, truly." The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the wet ground as thunder rolled in the distance. Her tears finally fell, blending with the rain, but she didn't speak. She didn't have to. The pain was shared, the heartbreak mutual. He stood in front of her, vulnerable and open, offering no promises, no ring, just the raw truth of a heart that had changed. And she, broken but brave, listened with her entire soul. That night, beneath the stormy sky, No kiss was exchanged, no embrace shared. But something far deeper passed between them. The moment where love was no longer a feeling but a choice. A quiet, painful, beautiful choice. Amira sat on her bed long after the rain had stopped. The silence around her broken only by the quiet rustle of papers and the storm inside her chest. Damien's letters were crumpled and tear-stained now. Each word a confession she never asked for, but couldn't stop reading. They were raw, unpolished, filled with contradictions, heartbreak and desperate clarity. She saw the man behind the lie, the one who hadn't known love until it stared him in the face with eyes like hers. She remembered every moment, the garden's hush, his trembling voice in the rain, the sincerity beneath his soaked clothes. All night she replayed it, not just what he said, but how he said it. There was no pride, no ego, just a man stripped of all armor, offering only truth. She cried, not because she was hurt, but because she finally understood. He hadn't just chased her, he'd let her see his soul. By morning, the bitterness had turned into stillness. And by afternoon, that stillness bloomed into something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in days. Hope. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in soft purples and fading gold, she returned to the garden. Her steps were slow but sure, her heart beating wildly in her chest, like it was waking up for the first time in years. The garden hadn't changed. The roses still bowed gently in the breeze. The fountain whispered its eternal lullaby. And under the trees stood Damien, his suit slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled from the wind, eyes searching for her the moment she arrived. In one hand, a bouquet of wildflowers, imperfect but real. In the other, a small velvet box that trembled between his fingers. When their eyes met, the world seemed to quiet again, as if nature itself held its breath. He stepped forward, not with confidence but with reverence. "This isn't about a challenge," he began, voice low, cracking with emotion. "I lost the challenge the moment I fell for you. But I won something I never knew I needed. I found the one woman who made my soul feel alive. Not because she believed in me blindly, but because she made me want to become someone worthy." He dropped to one knee, rain stains still visible on his shoes from the night before. The box opened, revealing a ring that shimmered like the sky above them, simple, elegant, timeless. "Will you take a chance on me?" he asked, eyes never leaving hers. "Not the version of me the world knows, but this me, the one who's still learning, still healing, still hopelessly in love with you." For a long moment Amira didn't move. Then her lips curved slowly, beautifully into a tear-soaked smile. She stepped closer, heart pounding, eyes shining. "Only if this time we walk forward together," she whispered, "with no secrets, no lies, just truth even when it's messy." Damien stood, and for the first time, pulled her into his arms, not like someone claiming a prize, but like someone finally coming home. Their embrace was soft, shaky, full of tears and laughter. There was no audience, no cameras, no fairy tale music, just two people who had walked through fire and met in the middle of the ashes, choosing to rebuild something honest. She didn't say yes for the money, the title, or the fantasy. She said yes to the man who'd been brave enough to admit he was wrong, who let go of pride to hold on to love. And as the stars appeared above them once more, they didn't kiss for the world to see. They simply held hands, fingers interlocked like a promise unspoken. Together they began again, not as a dare, not as a game, but as two imperfect hearts finally beating in sync, ready to write a new story, one secretless step at a time.